almost 10 after.
Yeah.
Probably just as long as
Too bad Ricky's
Yeah.
not here.
Because I'm medical, because you have to see about 3
So it's got a small enough group. I can introduce. I'm
Oh,
Gavin.
hi.
Oh, yeah.
What is your name?
Gavin.
Gavin.
Yes.
Gavin Brenda.
Brenda, nice to meet you.
Hi, Ira.
Ira, nice to meet you.
And I'm Diane.
Nice to meet you.
Good to
Diane.
meet you, Gavin.
All right. And everyone knows Bill.
Oh, yes.
Lucky for us women.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for coming.
Right, well,
So I'm Gavin. My wife Tracy and I, and this fine gentleman right here, run this place called The Float. So we're a float therapy center in Thunder Bay here. Anybody heard about Float?
Yeah, well.
Have you?
Yeah.
Have you
They tell me
been?
what it is.
No, we
Oh, no.
haven't been, but we heard.
I heard about you though.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we've been open for almost 4 years. We have 4 years in February, and we're a 100% local business. We've got 3 float tanks, and it's kind of what we do. So I'm going to start off with playing the little commercial that Westport Production made for us, and it won't give us a chance to totally disconnect with the world for 90 minutes.
You can turn it up on the
Tanks that are 7.5
Screen.
feet long, 5.5 feet wide, with 10 inches of water in them. In each tank, there's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salts dissolved into it. So when you go in there, you sit down, you touch the bottom, and as soon as you lie back, it just pops you up like a beach ball and you float on the surface. The water itself is heated to the same temperature as your skin, so after a while you lose sense of there being water on your skin, and you're just in total stillness. About 90% of the gravity is removed from your body's awareness. Blood pressure lowers because your heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood to all your muscles. Blood flow to your muscles and joints increases, so people recovering from injuries, they get a quicker recovery. It is a great stress reliever, feels great on the muscles, it's great for your nerves, it helps you sleep. That constant muscular hum of your body's response to gravity just quiets right down.
It's so awesome to be here when people come out for the first time after their float. A lot of people don't just run out, they'll stick around and they like to have a conversation about what the experience was, even if it was just the physical benefit that they got, just the whole idea of feeling like you're in space for that time. A lot of people feel that they were doing 360s in the tank, that they see lights and stars.
The only thing you're concentrating on is your breathing. You kind of lose touch with anything else that's going on. You would be totally amazed with how good you feel after.
It's a pretty unique feeling, so you can't get that anywhere else except for in space.
So much goes through your mind in the beginning, and you kind of you zone out, and it's just nothing.
You're just there. I know how butter melts. Because you lay there, you lay there, you lay there, and all of a sudden everything just lets go.
So we have 3 separate pod rooms. Each room has its own pod and its own shower. When you come in for a float, you have the room for 2 hours. So you come in and you shower. Everything is here for you. We have towels, robes, slippers, soap, shampoo, and conditioner.
And I'm not a real big fan of laying in the water, but it was awesome. It was really neat.
In daily life, we're just bombarded constantly with sensory stimulation. We're always plugged in. There's always something to kind of distract us. And when you go into the tank, all that sensory stimulation is removed. And you come out of the tank and colors seem brighter and sounds seem clearer, your music sounds better, and you feel refreshed. It's a perfect reset for life. All right, so that's kind of what it looks like and what it is. And so I'll talk a little bit about where floating came from and what it is. So this guy, John C. Lilly, is kind of credited with inventing the float tank. And he was a pretty interesting character. He was a psychoanalyst, a neurophysiologist in the 50s and 60s. And he was interested in the connection between the physical brain and what we call the mind, and kind of the origins of consciousness and conscious activity in the brain. And there was kind of 2 schools of thought circulating at the time. One was that the brain needs external stimulation to remain conscious, and the other one thought that it was kind of innate to the brain's internal activity. And so he wanted to create an environment where he could remove as much external stimulation as possible to see what happened to the brain. And he went really deep with it. He was kind of this is the 60s, remember? So he went pretty deep with the methods people used in the 60s, and so this was his first one. So it doesn't look as comfortable as ours. I think you'll notice. So he had kind of a breathing apparatus and had people just floating, but the idea was there. So he used the salt so that you were buoyant and you didn't feel gravity, and there was no sound or light and all that stuff. But it wasn't very comfortable. But what he noticed was all the people that he brought in, because he was doing research at the time, people would participate in the studies and they would come out with a sense of well-being, and that was kind of the main feedback he got. They seemed to be consistent with everybody, was there was all that stuff. They were taking away all the stimuli, but they all felt great after. That was kind of profound sense of well-being. So yeah, what he was trying to get rid of was the stimulation of other people, so you don't have to worry about having to talk to anybody. So kind of that social part of yourself is removed. You're not worried about bumping into anybody or having to talk to anybody. And then the light, sound, gravity, and temperature variation were removed. So he continued to tinker with the setup of the tank, and later on, this one right here was the first kind of commercial float tank he made. It was called the Samadhi, and it was kind of created in the 70s by Glenn and Lee Perry, a couple from California. And it's very similar to what, this was actually what I did my first float in. And it's the same thing, the experience is the same. It's just a little different. People are a little more hesitant to want to kind of crawl into something like that. But the idea is the same. You're lying flat, there's over 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, and you're just floating. It got kind of weird in the 70s. They kind of, as things did in the 70s, I guess. So yeah, this is the one we have. They call it the Evolution Pod. So it's a lot more of a commercially friendly setup. So it's just got a really excessive filter. And we have about 1,000 liters of water in the tank. There's about 1,100 pounds of Epsom salt in there. It's got under tank heating so that it can maintain the temperature really well while you're floating. And we can make it as warm or as cool as you like, because everybody's different in where they're comfortable with temperature. And it's got customizable lights and music, and yeah, the solid fiberglass surface to make it really easy to clean with no seams. I put this one up because this is in the locker room of the Patriots, New England Patriots. They got about three of these, and all their players float regularly as part of their kind of recovery protocol. So yeah, just some points about what it's like to remove all those sensory stimulations. So the isolation from other people. So when you're floating, there's no chance you're going to meet somebody. So there's it's kind of hard to conceptualize how much of our brain is occupied with that when we're kind of in normal life. Like we're always kind of ready to deal with other people and kind of putting on our social selves. And so just that whole part of your brain that needs to be preoccupied with social roles and obligations and personal image and possible interruption. It just like that girl said in the video, like there's all that stuff floating around in your mind when you start, and then you're lying there for so long that it has no choice. It just kind of goes away. Things just start to settle down. And then the light proof and the soundproof. So you don't have to shut the lights off, but it's there for you. So when you get in, the lights and music are both on, but there's a button for each, and if you want, you can shut them off. And we've made the rooms light and soundproof. So if you turn that light off, there's no light. Like you might think you see lights, but there's no lights there at all. And it's pretty rare, Like we don't often have zero light, and just to stay for a prolonged period in complete darkness it gives your brain a different sense of the world, because we interpret the world visually pretty dominantly, And so the other thing that that floating can provide is a little bit of insight into flow state. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's kind of what people like extreme athletes and people who are in the zone and really kind of dialed in report. And it's one of the characteristics of it is a merging of kind of self and environment. So there's no separation between you and what you're doing. So you can imagine like a basketball player in the zone, and they're not self-conscious and worried about anything else but the shot. So they're kind of completely locked in. And this can give you a little kind of taste of that. If you just let it happen and get out of the way, you can, you forget you're even there, you know, and you forget you even have a body and there's even water there. It's a pretty neat experience. And the absence of sound, it lets you hear your breath and your heartbeat and kind of your internal processes. So that's what I do every time when I get in there. It's just kind of, you know, I'll watch my breath for a while, and then pretty quickly I can start to hear my heart beating, and I use it to kind of time my breath. So I'll take like 4 heartbeats in and 6 to 8 out, and it's so rhythmic, and we usually don't hear that. And just kind of connecting with what's going on inside, you can really, it kind of deepens your awareness of your own body. Yeah. And then the anti-gravity. So because you're suspended and there's no part of your body is resting on anything, your muscles stop sending all those signals into your central nervous system. Because even if you're sitting there and you don't think like much is going on, your muscles are constantly sending information to your spinal cord and up to your brain about your position in space. You know, like your balance when you're standing there. A big part of your brain is occupied with just keeping you upright and kind of fighting against gravity. And when you're floating there, all that kind of muscular hum that's always coming in can just kind of disappear, and there's a lot less noise going on. So if you lay there again, just kind of spending that time and letting everything quiet down, you can really experience more space in your mind than is usually available to you. Yeah, and so gravity in effect kind of decreases our awareness of our external and internal processes. And then also because there's no gravity, there's nothing pulling on you. People often experience reduced muscle tension, so your muscles will just kind of let go. And that's always the big cue that I try to give people. A piece of advice I tell people is just try to let your body relax as much as you can. When you get in there, you're going to find like your neck you're going to want to hold your head up a little bit because you think it might sink, but it floats. So, and we got a little pillow if you want. You can put your head. But so you got to kind of give it some time and just try to let your neck stop fighting against it and just let the water hold you. And then I always tell people just pay attention and see where you're holding on with the rest of your body, and then work on letting it go. And if you can kind of let go physically, then your brain will kind of settle into it a lot more than it could. Yeah. And then the other one is temperature variation. So what we shoot for in the tank is, they call it skin receptor neutral. So the goal is that you don't feel the water. So we don't want it to be too hot or too cold. And so every time people come out, we're always kind of badgering them with how is your temperature? It's because we want to get that perfect temperature once they start floating. And so after a while, if we hit it just right, you don't even feel the water there anymore. And you got to kind of like wiggle your fingers and toes to make sure they're even there, because there's just no separation between you and the medium you're floating in, you know. And it's different. So it's not we don't want it warm or cool. It helps us keep the tanks really clean because nobody's sweating or nobody's just floating, you know. Yeah. So this is a wordy little piece. So there's some really great research going on in the float world right now. So there's a fellow named Justin Feinstein, and he's out of the Tulsa Laureate Institute for Brain Research, or LIBOR. And they started doing tests. So they set up a really sophisticated float lab where they have kind of biometric sensors and really, so they can monitor blood pressure and brain waves and all that stuff. And they started looking at kind of general population people and seeing, they did a control study with a control group doing an anti-gravity chair, and just looking at if there's something to floating that makes it different from other stuff, and they found that it did. Last year they did the first clinical trial, so they had 50 participants from a spectrum of anxiety and stress-related disorders like PTSD, generalized anxiety, agoraphobia, panic, and social anxiety, and most of them had kind of unipolar depression as well. And so they did 60-minute floats, and the measures were taken pre and post float. And kind of the big findings was, irrespective of what their diagnosis was, flotation substantially reduced their state of anxiety. And the cool thing was the most severely anxious participants reported the largest effects. So it's just a really, it's a great step in the right direction, because it's now just kind of scientific findings that to validate the value of floating as a treatment for anxiety. Yeah. So this is just kind of the yeah. So what I'd like to do now is kind of shift the direction of the talk to kind of talk about the overlapping benefits of floating and mindfulness meditation. Has anybody here had any experience with meditation or tried it? Have you? Good. Cool. So yeah, so although they're not the same thing, I've experienced very similar benefits from both, and most of the people who have done both see a really big overlap. And the float business can be tough from a marketing perspective. It's usually when people ask why they should float in dark silence for 90 minutes, it's often easier to describe the physical benefits. But kind of time and again, the people that seem to get the most benefit from floating, they always come out trying to describe the mental state that they reached in the tank. And every time they're describing it, it always has the hallmarks of a deep meditative experience. So it was actually my own experience with meditation that drew me to floating in the first place. I spent a lot of years kind of coming in and out of meditation practice. And so even though until recently I was kind of an on and off meditator at best, it's helped me more than any other skill that I've learned. So I'm definitely not an expert. So I'm not a meditation teacher. I'm not even a good meditator, I would say. But I want to talk about it because I think it's the best tool we have to kind of learn about our minds. And it can be a lot of value for people. And yeah, I think I'm confident that there will be a time when meditation is taught in schools alongside physical education as an essential life skill. And it's being taught in a lot of schools now. There's a lot of great kind of pilot programs going on. And it's a neat time now because it's a lot of the cultural baggage has been removed from it, and it's just the practice, and there's a lot of good science going on behind it. So I also work as a paramedic in Thunder Bay, and mindfulness is a big topic for us. So we've lost a lot of people to mental health related issues, and there's a lot of great people doing great things. And mindfulness has kind of been proposed as a way to kind of balance the stressors that we experience day to day. But I don't hear much talk about actually practicing meditation. So we do our wellness sessions and stuff, and there's a lot of tips and techniques to kind of be more present and be less reactive. But there's no real clear instruction on how to manage the mind, and that's where I think mindfulness meditation can come into it. So yeah, I think I'd like to kind of separate the signal from the noise in a sense, and kind of disentangle mindfulness meditation from the broader mindfulness industry surrounding it. I kind of feel like teaching mindfulness without teaching meditation is like sending a complete beginner into the gym without any instruction on how to work out. Just kind of go in there and get fit, and we'll see how it works. So I'm being a little facetious, but that analogy kind of describes my own experience or history of trying to practice meditation. I tried a lot of different forms of meditation, and I read a lot, but I never really had a teacher or any clear progression to follow. And as a result, I feel like a lot of the benefit I got was somewhat accidental. So I would kind of, find things and then miss a lot. But like I said, today there's a lot of resources out there that make it very simple, and they've kind of distilled the practice down to its secular core. So there's no, like I said, no cultural baggage is required. And its effectiveness is increasingly being supported by scientific literature. So yeah, I'm really excited about the growth of mindfulness in recent years. I think it can be somewhat of an antidote to the rising levels of anxiety and depression in the world today. And I think the comparison to physical training is appropriate. It can be useful to look at meditation as mental training. So we all understand that we can change our physical condition with exercise and diet and sleep, but we all know that's possible. You're not stuck with your current physiology. But when it comes to training the mind, it's often considered different. We know we can learn new things, but somehow the mind is considered kind of separate and fixed. Especially as an adult, it can seem strange or just uncommon to train the mind. But meditation can be a powerful tool to change the quality of our minds. And I'd like to read a little piece of a talk from Sam Harris about the real world value of meditation. So he's created the Waking Up Meditation app, which I've been using and I've got a lot of benefit from. And he explains it much better than I can, and he's one of those rare people who can speak in perfect prose. So I'm gonna read to you a little piece of what he said about meditation. So changing the quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. You can realize that happiness and suffering are both mental events. Everything good or bad must appear in consciousness to matter. Changing your mind is often as good as changing the world. You can try to change the world and get everyone around you to behave as you'd like, but try as you might, the sources of stress, disappointment, embarrassment, and self-doubt will always be there. Happily, there's another game to play, and not everyone knows about it. Rather than trying to change the world in each moment, there's another move open to you. You can look more closely at what you're doing with your own mind and actually cease to respond to life in ways that produce needless suffering for yourself and those around you. When we're lost in thought, there are certain things we tend not to notice about the nature of our own mind. For instance, every thought or feeling you've ever had, whether good or bad, has arisen and passed away. The anger you felt yesterday or a year ago isn't here anymore. And if it arises in the next moment, based on your thinking about the past, it will once again pass away when you're no longer thinking about it. This is a profoundly important truth about the mind, and it can be absolutely liberating to understand it deeply. If you do understand it deeply, that is, if you're able to pay clear attention to the arising of an emotion like anger, rather than merely think about why you have every right to be angry, it actually becomes impossible to stay angry for more than a few moments at a time. If you think that you can stay angry for a day or even an hour without continually manufacturing this emotion by thinking without knowing you're thinking, you're mistaken. This is an objective claim about the mechanics of your own subjectivity, and I invite you to test it, and meditation is the tool you would use to test it. Now, while I can't promise that meditation will keep you from ever getting angry again, you can learn not to stay angry or fearful or embarrassed for very long. And when talking about the consequences of a negative emotion like anger in the real world and in your life, the difference between moments and hours or days and weeks is impossible to overstate. So for me, that's the benefit. That's the real benefit of meditation. It's not thinking more clearly. It's sharpening your attention enough to be able to realize when you're lost in thought. And it's again, like you said, it's hard to overstate the value of being able to know when you're lost in thought. So a little bit about my history. So I was first exposed to meditation when I was 16 in Kenora, in Beaver Bay High School, by Mr. Hewitt in a class called World Religions. And the curriculum kind of traveled around the globe studying the world's great religions. And when it got to Asia, Buddhism came into focus. And we examined the cultural and philosophical foundations of Buddhism, and he explained to us the Four Noble Truths. Right? And so I can remember being absolutely captivated by what was to me then a completely new way of understanding the mental landscape. It was the first teaching I'd heard that hinted at the possibility of changing our relationship to our thoughts and the world. Learning about the fourth truth, though, remains the most valuable experience of my entire education. He introduced us to meditation, and not just the concept of meditation, but he showed us how. So we had multiple sessions where we pushed all the desks out of the way, and 25 cynical teenagers sat down, and he guided us through meditation, and he made it work. He was an incredible teacher. And I can say now that this class absolutely changed my life. It sparked a deep interest for me in Eastern philosophy and in meditation. But more importantly, it was my first glimpse of the fact that it's possible to change the way we experience our minds and the world. And looking back now, the influence of that initial spark on the course of my life is obvious. I continued to practice, even if poorly, on my own. And I became obsessed with Tai Chi and Aikido for most of my 20s. I think mostly because of their internal focus. They kind of have that same slant. And my love of martial arts took me to Japan for 2 years. where I spent many Sundays at a Zen temple in Kyoto that taught meditation to anybody who showed up. The priest there at the temple encouraged me to do a 3-day retreat at Eiheiji Daihanzen, which is one of the biggest, which is one of the oldest and the largest training monasteries of Soto Zen. So there was no, it was a very exciting prospect for me. There was no fee to attend beyond a voluntary donation. And being able to sit in half lotus with your knees on the floor was the only prerequisite to attend. I could barely do this. I could do it, but barely. It was not comfortable for me at all. And so I signed up and I went. When we arrived, we were given meditation cushions and the general rules of conduct. And they showed us to the dormitory and told us that practice would begin at 4 a.m. the next morning. So the experience itself was excruciating. And to this day, it was the most physically challenging thing I've ever done. My knees and hips would be screaming 10, 20 minutes into each session. And I found it impossible to focus on anything else. I would tolerate it for as long as I could and then shift my posture slightly for a little bit of relief, only to have the pain come back just as bad, if not worse. I was not present in the slightest. I found my mind jumping from eagerly anticipating my next posture shift to immediately dreading the return of the pain. And so I just cycled through thoughts of, what am I doing here? What's the point of sitting like this? How am I supposed to learn to meditate in agony? And this was a bad idea. So the first 2 days for me were torture. Beyond that, we had a Zen lesson every night, and beyond that, the 3 days were spent in silence. In our first Zen lesson, we met Kuriagi-san, or Mr. Kuriagi, and he was a Zen monk, Zen priest, I guess. He looked to be anywhere from 40 to 80 years old. And he spoke English very well, and he invited us to ask him questions. And this man was piercingly present, and with a softness about him that's hard to describe. There was just a profound ease to everything he did. It was really, really striking to meet this guy. And I can remember feeling annoyed with one of the other attendees in the group for his long-winded questions and his description about his own practice. And he just wanted to kind of, so I felt like this chatty American guy was holding the whole group hostage and kind of depriving us of the Zen lesson from this monk. But watching Mr. Kuriagi, there wasn't a hint of impatience, annoyance, or even daydreaming. He was just there. He's just listening with complete attention. And when my long-winded nemesis asked how one can overcome the discomfort of prolonged sitting to advance in the practice of meditation, Mr. Kuriagi just paused and he said, we all have challenges in practice. For me, sitting is so comfortable that I fall asleep very easily. Always a challenge, always a struggle. Just like that. And the combination of his answer and his demeanor really struck me. It just seemed to cut right through my self-centered irritation. Always a challenge, always a struggle. So while I was fuming in my own head about missing the Zen lesson from this lifelong monk, I was missing the Zen lesson from this lifelong monk. So I was struggling in my head with the mismatch between what I wanted to happen and what was actually happening. And Mr. Kuriagi was not. There was no struggle in him. So his way of being was the Zen lesson. And somewhere around the end of the second day, there came a point where my posture shift stopped working when we were sitting, and my pain was constant. And I started really considering leaving. I didn't think I could do it anymore. And out of desperation, I decided to just sit with the pain and try not to push it away or struggle against it. I tried to imagine like it was just another sensation, like an itch or a minor cramp, without struggling against it or trying to push it away. And slowly that subtle reframing completely changed the color of my experience. The pain was still there, but I was no longer completely absorbed by it. There was a sense that it was just happening, and there seemed to be a little bit of space around it. Don't get me wrong, it was still intense, but it was bearable. Which makes sense to me now, Because while I was torturing myself with thoughts of how long will this last and how can I make it stop, the pain was already there. I had already experienced it, which meant it wasn't unbearable because I had already borne it. It was the thoughts surrounding the pain that magnified my suffering in that moment. And I think the reason that insight is still so vivid to me today is because I realize it's what I've been struggling with my whole life, and certainly every time I sat down to meditate. It's the identification with our thoughts and the inability to recognize when we're lost in thought is a profound source of misery. And not just for me, but that insight has been echoed through history by some of the greatest thinkers. Some other pictures of temple. So yeah, in the 1st century AD, the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And 16 centuries later, Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. In the next century, Blaise Pascal wrote, distraction is the only thing that consoles us from our miseries, yet it itself is our greatest of miseries. He also wrote, all men's miseries derive from not being able to sit in a quiet room alone. So I don't know if those 3 days made me a better meditator or not, but I got a glimpse that it's possible to stop struggling, and it kind of gave me impetus to keep practicing. So fast forward to 2013, when my cousin from Whistler called me after his first float and said, dude, you got to try this floating thing. Mm-hmm. So my wife Tracy and I, who you saw in the video, we drove down to Minneapolis just to try floating. And at the time I hadn't been meditating regularly, but after my first 90-minute float, I immediately recognized its value. Floating gave me the same spacious quality of mind that regular meditation had, and it seemed to last for days afterwards. So we both knew right away that it's something we wanted to do all the time. So we immediately started making a plan and a business plan, and our second float was in our place about a year later. Opening the float center was more than just a way for us to float more often. We really wanted to share it with people. It was that, it still is that, but we wanted to share it with people. So the most rewarding part of running the float is the conversations we get to have with people, and before and after they float. So I love watching the change pre and post float. So people will come in, like people do, you know, they might have had a rough day at work or had to rush through traffic to make their appointment. And they come in with a sense of rush and kind of hurriedness, you know, and then they float, and then they come out. And they just come out a lot more slowly than when they went in, you know? So that rush and hurriedness is kind of replaced with the same sense of ease that Mr. Kuryagi had. You know, it's a change of speed. And it's hard to exaggerate the value of just being able to stop struggling, or just knowing that it's possible. It can really change your life in a meaningful way. So I think it's important to clarify what's meant by mindfulness and how it differs from other meditation, because it's a big term now. So the type of meditation most commonly associated with mindfulness is known as Vipassana, or insight meditation. And the quality of mind that it cultivates is known as mindfulness. So mindfulness is kind of what you get from this type of meditation. And there's a quickly growing literature on its psychological benefits. So the practice of Vipassana aims at cultivating a state of open, non-judgmental, non-discursive attention to the contents of consciousness, whether pleasant or unpleasant. And cultivating this quality of mind has been shown to modulate pain, mitigate anxiety and depression, improve cognitive function, and it even produces changes in gray matter density of the brain, areas related to learning, memory, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. So he would know well. He's a third-year psych student, and all but my point is there's some big scientific research just to the value of this type of mental training. So the practice itself is extremely profound in its benefits. So the practice itself is simple, but very profound. So essentially we learn to recognize consciousness as the prior condition to all of our experience. And when we meditate, we learn to simply rest as the space of awareness in which all our thoughts, sensations, and phenomena arise. I realize this sounds abstract and confusing, but it's really not. We train to recognize that our thoughts arise on their own in consciousness. And the same way that sounds happen in the room or discomfort happens in your knees, it's something that's constantly arising. And the practice is simply observing these thoughts and phenomena without trying to grasp or push them away. Mindfulness meditation differs from more concentration-based techniques where you focus on an object of attention, like a mantra or a mental image, so intently that discursive thought kind of fades away. So that kind of training can produce really pleasurable and profound states, but it doesn't seem to have the carryover, that interreal kind of waking life that mindfulness techniques have. And that fact seems to be kind of reinforced by the fact that the bulk of scientific research is focused on mindfulness-based techniques. So I'd like to share some of the resources. If anybody's interested in learning this kind of stuff, there's some great resources out there. So the way that I kind of learned in the first place was reading books. And it's very difficult to read a book and then try to practice because you're verbally trying to regurgitate what you read while you're trying to meditate, and it can be kind of distracting. And there's the best thing that I do with my phone, besides FaceTiming my kid at work, is meditate. So I use meditation apps. So there's a few good ones I'd like to recommend. Headspace is really good. And 10% Happier is also a really good one. And Waking Up by Sam Harris. This is the one that I use. And everyone's different, so I mean, there's a lot out there, and it's good to kind of shop around and see what kind of speaks to you. This one really spoke to me. And the sessions are 10 minutes, and it's hard to, it just makes it so easy. All you have to do is just show up and do it. And it's hard for me to convince myself that I don't have 10 minutes to sit down every day. So that slide was, that was what this one was for. So I've been talking for a while now, and you're probably sick of hearing my voice. So I was hoping we could all do a meditation together. So I'm going to pull up one of these sessions, and it's about 8 minutes long. You don't have to move. You can sit right where you are. Try to just sit comfortably, and it's helpful to keep a kind of a straight posture. And Sam's going to do the rest of the work for us here. All right. I'm going to join you. Let me know if everyone can hear this.
Welcome to day 2 of the Waking Up course. Once again, take a seat, either in a chair or cross-legged on a cushion. It's good to sit as comfortably as you can. And it's usually best to be sitting as straight as you can. Now, close your eyes and become aware of the sensations of sitting. Feel your arms at your sides. And perhaps take a few deep breaths. Just allow gravity to settle you into your seat. Now, as you did yesterday, become aware of the sensations of breathing. Notice where you feel the breath most clearly, either at the tip of the nose or in the rising and falling of your abdomen or chest. It doesn't matter where you pay attention to the breath. And you can change your focus from session to session if you like. But for the moment, just pick one spot and focus there. There's nothing especially significant about the breath, but it's something you always have with you. And it's as good as any other sense object as a basis for training your powers of attention. Eventually, the practice will incorporate everything that arises in consciousness. Just feel the mere sensations of breathing. From the beginning of the inhalation to the pause between breaths, and follow the exhalation to the end. Try to cover the breath with your awareness. And once again, there's no need to control your breathing. Just let it come however it comes. What we're doing here is sharpening the only tool you really have, your mind. This is what you take with you in any situation in life. This is what determines how you respond to emotional stress and physical pain and every other difficulty you encounter. This is the basis for every decision you make and every interaction you have with other people. And as you begin to observe it, you'll notice, perhaps with growing amazement, that your mind is totally out of control. And as you try to pay attention to the breath, you'll begin to notice that the primary obstacle to your paying attention is thinking. Thoughts continually arise. And you forget that you are even trying to meditate at all. And this happens over the course of mere seconds. Just try to count the next 10 breaths without getting distracted. You can silently in your mind count 1 on the inhalation and 1 again on the exhalation, and then 2. See if you can get to 10. unless you have a lot of concentration, you probably were unable to tell how precarious your awareness of the breath actually was. How your attention was being buffeted on all sides by discursive thought. Now the goal isn't to stop your thoughts or to suppress any emotion that might arise along with them. It is rather to notice these mental events clearly and to experience them fully, more fully, in fact. To recognize them as appearances in consciousness the moment they arise. But that is generally a very difficult thing to do in the beginning. So for the time being, the moment you discover that you're thinking, just observe it and come back to the breath. In this final minute of the meditation, just start again. Just feel the next breath as it comes. Okay. Well, just take a moment to take stock of how you're feeling. Whether you're tired, or restless, or calm. Whether your experience was pleasant or unpleasant isn't really the point. What you're learning here is a new skill. And unless you're coming to this course already knowing how to meditate, you can't expect to be able to do it well in the beginning. As the practice develops over the next days and weeks, you'll see that you do less, not more, than you normally do. You're not adding an artifice to your experience in the present moment. Rather, you're simply becoming less distracted. The purpose of meditation is to discover what your mind is like when you're no longer perpetually identified with the contents of your thoughts. And to make progress, you simply need to be willing to begin again. And we will do that tomorrow on day 3 of the Waking Up course.
Gee, life feels a little lighter.
Does it?
It does.
Yeah, it's a great, it's like a warm bath for your brain. It's a nice thing to do.
Do you practice like something like that possibly for people that, before they go into this tub? Like Rick himself, I don't know how he went in this thing. He just said it was all right. But I mean, he can't live for 10 seconds without his mind flying for a cell phone, and he's, you know, like, so I don't know what his experience really was. He didn't say, he just said it was okay.
Yeah.
But he said he couldn't keep the lid closed because he's, you know, his mind races all the time, you know, like.
And I mean, Liam can attest, because Liam works at a float too, and so we're always talking to people about floating when they come out, and that's such a common thing to say, like, you know, and sometimes they'll say like, oh, I couldn't really clear my mind, as if it's something that's even possible, you know, like when you see in that how hard it is to count 10 breaths, it's such a common thing. But what I do also hear from people is they'll say, I got restless for a while, wanted to get out, And then I just kind of, it went away. And then my float was great. Like, it always seems to be right on the other side of that. If you can just kind of wait that out, the bliss is always right on the other side of that boredom or restlessness. To answer your question, I don't talk about, like, this is the first time I've ever talked about meditation as it directly relates to floating, so appreciate you guys letting me do this. It's been awesome. But it seems too important not to, because they're so related. And the way, what would stop somebody from sitting and meditating for 90 minutes is the physical discomfort, right? But in the tank, it's such a comfortable, it's so comfortable. Like, you're completely supported, and your muscles feel great. And you get that same benefit of just letting your mind kind of still on its own. It's different. It feels different. It's not as structured or rigid. Like, meditation has that sense that you're doing something, where floating is a lot more of just kind of letting it go, And it takes practice. Like, for people like Rick, like, I always recommend, or I try to just be clear, like, you don't have to stay in the whole time, and just, it gets easier as you do it. Like, your mind will kind of get used to not having a lot coming in. But it can be tough if that's our daily habit, is to always have something going on. The mind doesn't like it when you take all that away. Yeah.
Did he make it the 90 minutes?
I think he did. Yeah, I
Must
think
have
he
been
might
pushing. He must have been fighting.
Yeah, he's just fighting.
He
Just
must
grit his
have
teeth.
burned my cell phone.
Yeah, I think he might. We chatted for a while after, and then that's when he told me about this group and last week. So he might have come a little bit. He did it. Yeah.
Because I watched, programs before there of torture, like this deprivation, where they put people in these tanks and they,
Right.
so and it causes them to go like insane.
Crazy. Yeah, that's they tried to get away from the sensory deprivation term because of that CIA practice. But that was like for days and days, where they would kind of cover people's eyes and put stuff on their hands so they had no tactile sensation, and like deprive them from sleep. Like, there was a lot more to it. Like, they weren't just floating comfortably in salt water. I think there was a lot, but it still has that kind of cultural connotation to it. So.
Like Rick, he showers. He's showering and running every morning. Me, when I'm finished, I want to just lay in the tub and crank the water up. And,
Yeah.
Well, okay, what's with the Epsom salt? Like, I know Epsom salt baths are good for you.
Yeah.
You choose that over like regular salt for a specific reason? Or?
Yeah. It's like it's magnesium sulfate. So you kind of get some magnesium through your skin. Like, that's why doctors always say when you're hurt, like, take Epsom salt baths, because they think you get magnesium from the bath. Like, the main purpose of it is just to increase the density of the water so that you float. Like, it's about 3 times as dense as the Dead Sea. So, like, it's pretty neat. As soon as you lie flat, it just pops you up and you're just floating. And it's like a pharmaceutical grade Epsom salt. So it's people have tried with Himalayan salt, but it stains everything pink. Like, all their tank, everything stains pink. So it's not a great idea.
I brought some of that home and I put it in the salt shaker. And the wife says, "Where's my salt?
Yeah.
What is that pink garbage in there?" Got used to it. Made no difference.
Yeah.
So about things happening in the testimonials,
Right.
how are you feeling with people coming out of those things? Like, what do they testify to? Like,
Yeah, mostly just that. Like, people will come out describing things that sound so kind of mundane. Like, someone will say something like, I felt a bead of water drip down, but it's like it wasn't even happening to me. Or like, it's hard to say. Like, it's just the sense of just being locked in your head. Like, when you have that amount of time and with nothing coming in, it kind of, like, your sense of awareness seems to get bigger. Like, you're kind of feeling with your whole. Yeah, it sounds wooey, I know, but it's really true. Like, it's just you just kind of get out of your head a little bit. Like, you can hear your heartbeat and sensations in your body can kind of become really clear. It's been big for pain relief, like people with chronic pain, and I think there's a big kind of nervous system component to always kind of guarding against pain, and like Yeah, there was a fella who came in, his sister brought him in, and we had to like carry him in, because he couldn't stand up straight. And we got him in there, and he said he was fine, so we shut the door and left him, and he stayed the whole time. And he said when he lied back, like he was waiting for the pain, you know, and then it never came. And then hear him talking about how like he just felt everything kind of let go, and he walked out straight. Like it was a pretty profound, you know, that was a pretty profound case. But people get a lot of benefit, especially people who deal with pain chronically, you know, like who have it always there, like just letting everything kind of settle on its own. And it can be, it's a good complement to, you know, massage and stuff that's a lot more active. Like this is passive, you're kind of letting things settle on their own.
How do you know when your time is up?
Oh, good. Yeah, great question. So at the end, yeah, there's a light that if you had the light off, the light comes back on, and there's like a nice kind of Chinese flute music that comes in to tell you it's done. And if you fell asleep, which is totally safe, I fall asleep at least once, almost every time. If you fell asleep and missed those two things, about 3 minutes later, the filter comes on. So the jets come on and makes a bunch of noise and wakes you up for sure. So yeah. And I'm always clear because it's funny, the little things that like can prevent people from relaxing. Like people worry like, oh, I don't want to miss. And then thinking, oh, was that it? You know what I mean? And then you can sit there for half an hour wondering if you missed the cue to get out. So I always tell people at the end, if you missed it, the filter's going to come on and kicks you out pretty quick. Please.
Have you ever had anybody come in who was with Alzheimer's or, you know, going into that situation? Because their minds don't work perfectly anymore.
Yeah.
Have you had experience with a client like that?
Not directly. I can't say that not that I've known anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like not, I think the oldest, we had a 90-year-old come in and float, and she loved it. And I don't know her well enough to know if you know, there was any kind of cognitive decline from where she was, but and I don't know of any like direct research being done there. But
Have you ever had someone come in that at times has seizures, you know, that would you let them in your tank?
So that's one of the things in our waiver, you know, and that's one of the big concerns. That said, my uncle, who helped me build this place when we were kind of renovating and everything, very shortly after we built that, he had a big heart attack and kind of open heart surgery and like a quintuple bypass. And then he had a stroke shortly after. And after he had the stroke, he had been floating always, but after he had the stroke, he was coming in to float because he had a real hard time. You get really tired. Like his brain would get really tired, even just hearing 2 different conversations at once, like he'd just get exhausted. So he found it really helpful to float, just kind of take everything away. Then a little while after his stroke, he started getting seizures. And I still let him float because he wanted to. I mean, he was a family member, and I sat outside the room, and I could hear if he was splashing. But it is a big concern. Like it would be if I didn't know somebody, and I would be very concerned if they had a seizure disorder that wasn't controlled. You know, like we have the waiver, and they sign in there. You know, they're adults and they can make their own decisions. But yeah, that's a good question.
Because the brain is not quiet when you're having a seizure. It's really
no, it's not at all.
chaotic. And I thought, if you were at a good period in your life, but you have had seizures, it may be very healing to the brain to float.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of people who have a seizure disorder and they're medicated for it, and they haven't had a seizure in years and years. And so that's not an issue. The big one is if it's not managed, I guess.
The temperature, okay, there's the water temperature, your body's temperature, and then what about the air that is above you? Because there is an airspace, of course.
So the there you go. So So you're sitting here, but if that lid is closed, if you reach up, you can't touch the top. Like, it's quite big. It looks like a small car in the room, and so the water's kind of heated up by the filter. It's got a main heater, and then underneath the tank, there's coils that keep the water heated. And we found that we keep the air temperature in the room about 28 degrees, so we always leave it warmer than in the lobby. And we found that if it's the same temperature as the lobby, people get chilly. Because if you get cold, it's usually the air that makes you feel cold. So when you have the lid closed, it keeps the temperature a lot more constant. You can't really see it, but on the whole back side, it's all open, and we have air coming in and out of the room, so it's not, there's air coming in, but it lets for the air inside the pod gets a little warmer.
So you almost don't perceive the air above you either as being different from the water?
That's
or you
the-
do?
No, that's the goal. Like, and if we can nail your temperature perfectly, like you can get to that where you don't, like, it all feels the same. Like, you stop even feeling the water, and there's nothing. We always tell people that if you get warm while you're in there, because sometimes people start to feel too warm, or if you crack the lid a little bit, you can kind of get cooler air from the room and control your temperature that way. Temperature is a big one. It's kind of our main job is making sure the temperature is okay. Is if we can control for that piece, that's the biggest thing that determines if someone has a great flow versus a kind of an okay flow.
So what is the temperature of the water?
We keep it about, so we found that about 94.3 degrees Fahrenheit on our thing. That's where most people find it comfortable. And that's kind of like for first timers, unless somebody comes in and says they're always cold, then we might bump it up a little bit, or vice versa, I tend to find it cooler, much comfortable,
So it's
much
a little
cooler.
under body temperature then, eh? So you get
Yeah.
98.6 is body.
Yeah, like your core temperature.
Yeah.
But like your skin temperature is usually somewhere around 93.5.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the first one, we try to get a sense the best we can for what the thermostat is of the person. And then after they come out, we're always asking, because the sooner we can nail down the perfect temperature, then your flow will certainly work great after that. Yeah. Oh,
How does your pricing work?
the pricing work, so everybody's first float is $39 for the 90-minute float. And I mean, you can get out whenever you like, but we give you up to 90 minutes just to give you that time. After that, single floats are $59, and then we have packages, like a 3-pack for $150 and a 10-pack for $390. We do a monthly membership thing that a lot of people seem to really like, and that's if you wanted to float once a month, which I find is a perfect way to just kind of check in. It's $39 a month, and that gets you one float every month. And then if you wanted to come again or a third time during the same month, they're $29. And it's not we don't do like a contract thing. We just kind of go month to month, and if you miss one, if for some reason you can't get there that month, then it just rolls over. You got two floats for the next month.
How long have you been doing this? Like
It'll be 4 years in February.
4 years?
Yeah.
Is business operating in this town?
Yeah, it's been really good.
Cool.
Yeah, we're right beside the Madhouse.
Okay,
Yeah, just across from Fireweed and all that stuff.
okay.
How does the cleaning system work
Oh,
for this?
Great question.
Yeah.
So this thing right here, you can't really see the whole thing. That's the filter, and in between each person, it filters the full volume of water about 4 times, and it's got UV and ozone and a 1 micron cartridge filter. And that might not mean anything to you, but that like a typical hot tub filter is about 50 microns. So this is and we change, like I'm changing that thing all the time. And so it's cleaning the water between each one, and then at nighttime it does about 25 cycles of the full volume of water. And we use hydrogen peroxide as a sanitizer, which is very effective when combined with UV. Like it's even more effective than a chlorine or a bromine, and it doesn't produce any of the like the byproducts that chlorine would, which just concerned me, for especially it being kind of a closed space to have chlorine, it just wasn't good. And the big difference, like our health inspector loves it, like we make his job easy because the biggest challenge that pools have is that people don't fully shower before they get in. You know, like I'm guilty, like just kind of, you know, you jump in, right? And then bathing suits being dirty, like are not clean, right? So in our place, everybody showers first, and there's soap, shampoo, and conditioner, and we're very, you know, kind of that's the rules. Like everybody showers fully first, rinses off really well. And because when you're in there, you're not sweating, or you're not moving around like swimming. You know, if you're still sweating when you're swimming, right? But here, because you're not warm or cool, it's a much easier load to deal with, and our filtration system is much more extensive. Like just for that little bit of water, we got that big commercial filter going on it. About every week, we replace about that much water that we lose to evaporation. So over the course of about 10 weeks, the full volume of water is replaced, and then every 6 months we drain the whole thing and then replace it. Start over again.
So the tub or pod, whatever it is, does that get cleaned at the
Yes.
same time or somehow, or steamed, or?
Yeah. So twice a week I go in with peroxide spray and goggles and mask and everything, and disinfect the whole thing. And then in between each float, we're disinfecting all the kind of points of contact, you know. So and then the whole thing gets clean, because that's a very important piece to maintain the cleanliness of the water, is keeping the surfaces clean. And that's the big advantage to this style of tank, because there's no seams anywhere, where like the old kind that I showed you before, like that initial one, they had kind of interlocking panels that you had to put silicone caulking in, which was just a place for, you know, stuff to collect. Where this is all just solid fiberglass that's easily disinfectable. You know?
So did you buy that, or is it manufactured, or?
Yeah. This one comes from a company called Superior Float Tanks, and they're in Virginia. So we bought 3 of them.
It must have been hard to transport them out.
Yeah, it was hard to get them into the rooms. That was a challenge. Yeah, we had fun.
Have you ever had somebody that was claustrophobic and was afraid that they wouldn't be able to get out or open it again?
Yeah, we have like a ton of people who think they're claustrophobic,
Oh, yes.
or who say that they're
Right.
worried about it. But once we kind of get in and show them and tell them that you can leave that lid wide open if you want, you can leave that light on, and if somebody's worried, like we always tell them, you know, get in, close it, open it, close it, open it, turn the light on, turn the light off, like just so your brain knows that this is all in your control. Nothing's locked here. Like this is all you're in control of this whole thing. And yeah, we haven't had anyone who like panicked, you know, out of the thousands of people who've kind of come through. So it's been cool. But that's the most common concern we get. Everybody says that. I'm too claustrophobic. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, oh please.
When we're in the
Quad, that's it.
do we lock our room from the inside?
You do. Yeah, you take all your stuff in there and you lock the room, so it's
So
yours.
if we have our purse or something, we
It's
can
all in
relax
there. Yeah,
anyways?
that's right. Yeah, and we have parking, so you don't have to worry about the meter. And yeah, and I mean, in case of emergency, like we have a key. If anything had to happen. But yeah, you take all your stuff in there and you lock the door, and the room is yours. No one's coming in there. So when that door closes, you leave the world out there. It's your time. Yeah.
You had mentioned the word aikido.
Right.
Well, I'm thinking, you've seen me before because my son is Spencer Earlwood.
That's fine.
I'm thinking that's why I should know you a little bit, because I attend all their tests.
Yeah, I know Spencer. I haven't seen him for a while, but how is he?
He's doing good.
Good. Is he still training?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. Good.
Girl's ready for his black belt.
Is he really? Wow.
Master keeps putting it off, and I said, look, you don't need the test.
Yeah.
You know, you can do your work, you don't need the title.
Yeah. for sure.
Apparently they have 5 or 6 people beat him up and don't have to follow the rules while he's having his test.
Oh, yeah.
As a mother, I don't approve. But you know what, after listening and understanding this,
Yeah,
the twins had their birthday on February 14th. They're both getting
right on.
a
Oh,
free
cool.
gift
Oh,
certificate.
that'd be great to see him. Yeah. Tell him I said hello.
So are you originally from Thunder Bay?
I am, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, my wife and I both are. Yeah.
So how did you find it going to another country like that?
It was neat.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It was, yeah, really cool experience. The people were very kind, very warm, kind of
Do
welcome.
they meditate or do they just smoke the dope or what?
They don't smoke the dope at
No?
all. And meditation like is not, it's different. Like no, like meditation isn't super common like you think it would be. Like, even though it's kind of a Buddhist country, the Buddhism is very different. Like it's almost like people have kind of shrines and stuff. Like it's kind of mixed with Shinto, which is the kind of, yeah, it's the older, it's kind of the religion native to Japan, and then Buddhism came in later, and the two kind of merged. A really neat kind of merging. Like the Buddhism in Japan is very different from that of other countries, and but kind of what most people practice is different. Like they'll have priests come and, like Buddhist priests come and bless their things and do. So it's almost just like us, you know, like people they kind of outsource their spirituality to someone else, or a lot of people do. But yeah, yeah. But the sense of culture there, like people would ask me what Canadian culture is like, and I found myself just at a loss to what's a Canadian food, and I'd be like, man, poutine,
Hamburger, McDonald's.
you know, but for them, like you ask, and there's just thousands of years of history, and the festivals that they have, kind of, and it all seems to cycle around the harvest and different times for agriculture, and they have different, and there's just so much tradition and culture tied into all the reasons why they celebrate. Like little kids to old people are doing the dances and stuff.
But we have such a conglomeration of
That's
different
right.
cultures
Totally.
converging into a new country.
Absolutely.
And so everybody's bringing their own sorts of big mixed bag.
That's it.
Whereas they haven't had that. They've had the tradition all the way through.
Exactly, and it's a tiny island, and it's a very homogeneous population. Like there's very little immigration and stuff. Like it's very Japanese. Like it doesn't matter how long you live there, they call you gaijin, which means foreigner, and like right to your face, just gaijin, and like so it like to outsiders, a lot of it can seem like almost racist, you know, like the stuff they say, like they call if you're half.
Because we're different.
Yeah, they'll call you half, like he's half. That means half Japanese, like, which, like, imagine calling somebody a half breed here, like we would never say it, you know, like it's just a very but it's very different there, like just because it's so homogenous.
We've lost our culture here. Somehow, I don't know.
Yeah.
Changed, all the food changed, you know, I mean, restaurants, there was a few restaurants when I was a kid, there was no McDonald's, you didn't go out to eat unless it was a special occasion or something. Yeah, no farms no more, everybody lives in the city. Anyway.
Oh, please.
I was thinking about water as a source of grounding.
Yeah.
Do you find maybe the way the people show up after relaxed and blissful, that in fact they have grounded? Or
I
is
think
there
there's
any
some
connection there?
I think there's something to that. There was a fella at one of the flow conferences we went to. They do a big kind of
flow conference in Portland every year. And he wrote a book called Blue Mind, and it was kind of centered around water, like in how, like his whole message is how it's important to preserve the water because we depend on it. But he was talking about how poignant memories are from childhood that involve water, like, and you think about it, like the times on the beach and stuff, like just how vivid those are, like when you're around water, like there is something about water that, and it does give you that, like it just, you know, and then you have, yeah, you just feel it's clean.
Tends to be very positive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this has been really effectively used with people with PTSD. Like the American military has really got on board with floating as a treatment for people who with kind of medication resistant depression and stuff after tours and things. And like I know myself for like on the ambulance, like after, you know, really bad calls where I just can't shake that feeling of you know, like the brain doesn't know what to do with what you just saw. And I've had numerous times where I'll go there at nighttime and float. And you'd think that you would just kind of sit there and almost ruminate and think about things, but like there's just nothing. And you know, I just feel like it gives my brain space to breathe, you know, and come out, and there's just like the same way as, yeah, there's just some space around it, and your brain kind of has a chance to process what's in there without anything else coming in.
Well, we pile stress on top of ourselves more and more and more and more every day.
Yeah.
And then we go to the internet and we see all this stuff about the, you know, the cars burning and the weapons they're using on things, and it just builds up, and you know, and life in general, you know, it's going along and you don't get any rest from anything, you know. You sleep, but you're tired when you wake up, you know, like, oh. Like I said, a little meditation right here gave me some
Awesome.
relief.
Yeah. Not bad. Yeah, it's a funny time.
I don't know why we stay so stressed. It won't matter in 100 years anyway. So, somebody told me that won't matter in 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not.
What are your hours?
So we only close on Tuesdays, and that's our kind of big cleaning day. And on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, we open 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. On Friday, we're 9 to 9. Sorry. 9 to 9, yeah, that's our winter hours. Saturday we're 9 to 5, and Sunday is 10 to 4. Sorry, you had a question?
The magnesium sulfate, like when you drain the water and, or, you know, and it's cleaned and whatnot, you don't put more magnesium in every time, right?
We do, yeah. It's a very expensive process.
Because that water is just drained out and the
Yeah,
magnesium
no-
goes with it.
yeah,
It's somehow not precipitated out and reclaimed or nothing like that.
There's no way to do it.
do that,
No
eh?
way to do it.
Without being
Yeah.
ridiculous about it.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah, it's an expensive process, and that's why we're so kind of diligent with like maintaining the water, you know. About maintaining the water, like the, you know, the pH and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then and diligent with explaining to people the procedures on how to do it, like, because it's, I mean, for us, cleanliness is everything, like because if we had to, for some reason, drain the tank, for some reason, it's about $1,500 worth of salt in each tank, so it'd be an expensive thing to do. Yeah.
Well, so how much salt is in that particular, I mean, there's you've got a tank of water, like built up, you're saying that's beyond the float?
No, so the water stays here, and it's circulated through, like, there's two, you know, an intake and an outtake that lead into this filtration system, and it pulls it through the UV and the ozone system,
Yeah.
and then the filter, so it filters out any particulate and goes through the UV and ozone, and so the water's in there, and all the salt stays in there, and it's just continuously
It's part,
circulating.
okay.
Yeah, so there's Yeah, like when we put it in, the pile of salt, like you'd never think that it would dissolve in the water, but you just put the water in, run the filter with just to keep it moving, and it takes about 6 hours for all the salt to dissolve, and eventually it does.
So that same water is, okay, so it's filtered and et cetera and goes through the cleansing process and that, but that's used for how long again?
Well, 6 months for you.
I see, and then you have to top it up.
That's
from
right,
time
yeah,
to
so
time
we,
to
like, we're
maintain the
constantly,
amount.
yeah, there's about 10 inches total, and we lose about an inch, every week to evaporation.
Or whatever.
And so, yeah, the water's always kind of changing over, but the salt doesn't go anywhere. Oh, it does, but not to the same extent. But water does, we're always checking and keeping the salt topped up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that dissolved magnesium goes through that cleaning process
Mhm,
too, along
mhm.
with the H2O.
Yeah, like
Okay.
it just looks like water,
Well,
like
yeah.
it's all suspended in there, but if you dip your hand in there and let it dry, it's just completely white. So our job is just cleaning salt off things all day. That's it, there's salt everywhere. It's a salty business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Very good, thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Mr.